请收看美国 ABC 英语新闻。
On World News Tonight this Sunday, going to church in Jonesboro.
This is my story.
The first Sunday after the worst week the town has ever seen. The president works the crowd in Africa while Republicans at home accuse him of obstructing justice in the Paula Jones case. And how the best economy in generations has missed an entire state.
From ABC News, this is World News Tonight, Sunday.
Good evening, I'm Aaron Brown, and this Sunday for us begins in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where so much happened this week and so much changed. 4 children and one of their teachers have been buried. 2 other children remain in jail, accused of their murders. The people of Jonesboro went to church this Sunday, just like they always do, but of course it wasn't like it used to be, and it won't be for a long time to come. ABC's Dean Reynolds is in Jonesboro.
The people of Jonesboro sought comfort in the scriptures this Sunday.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow, I will not be afraid, for he will comfort me.
There are 90 churches here, almost one for every 500 people. And after the week just passed, worshipers came to them in droves.
Especially the children who did the shooting. We're praying for them. We know that God wants them to know that he loves them.
I hope you didn't come this morning thinking that somehow someone would be able to get up and just explain everything that's happened in Jonesboro, Arkansas and in Westside. Deep down, we know we can't.
But that didn't stop some people far away from Jonesboro from trying.
Children see us and learn from us, and they're not being taught from us necessarily what is right and wrong, and they're not being given consequences.
We have such a vast, gratuitous amounts of violence in television movies. It's disturbing. It's very disturbing.
Our society makes a profit out of violence. We have turned violence into merchandising and marketing, and kids learn by observation and imitation.
As for the kids accused in this tragedy, not everyone seems of a mind to pray for them. Neighbors are now calling 11-year-old Drew Golden a demon and 13-year-old Mitchell Johnson a bully. Besides, all the praying in the world cannot erase an awful fact about this tragedy, that no one in this town, not their parents, teachers, or classmates, took the boys and their repeated threats of violence very seriously until it was too late. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Jonesboro, Arkansas.
The town of Herndon, Pennsylvania also spent the day mourning the loss of some of its young people. Hundreds of people gathered for a memorial service there for the 11 friends who died in a cabin fire 1 week ago. In Washington, Republicans were on the attack today, joining lawyers for Paula Jones in accusing the president of obstructing justice. The issue again, the letters Kathleen Willey wrote to the president. The Jones team says they demanded those letters months ago and were told there were none. Republicans jumped all over that today. In Washington tonight, ABC's Mike Von Fremd.
The White House explanation that the Jones lawyers asked for documents from the president's personal files and that the reason they were not turned over is because the letters were official White House correspondence did not ring true with one of the president's harshest critics.
The president cannot, at least with a straight face, claim that these were either personal records or presidential records. They are clearly covered by that request, and clearly there has been, in this instance, again, obstruction of justice.
But a top presidential advisor today said the problem was not at the White House and laid blame at the feet of Paula Jones's lawyers.
The law is based on procedures. They have clearly made a mistake and poorly served their client in not executing correctly what they should file, and now are trying to shift the blame for where the responsibility lies. They poorly served their client.
The White House and other Democrats also denounced the Jones lawyers for making public an unsubstantiated 20-year-old allegation of sexual assault that even the women in question denied under oath.
It isn't simply that there isn't supporting evidence on this rape charge, which would make it outrageous enough for it to be in the Jones materials. Is that there's actually a sworn affidavit where the woman claimed this did not happen.
Despite the White House outrage, independent counsel Kenneth Starr this past week subpoenaed more documents from Paula Jones's attorneys relating to the most recent allegations of improper sexual conduct by Mr. Clinton. Mike Von Fremd, ABC News, Washington.
President and Mrs. Clinton will try to get away from it all for the next couple of days at least. They arrived in Botswana today, the 5th country on the president's 6-nation African tour. They headed for the country's premier game reserve, where they're on a safari. Earlier in the day, the first couple attended a church service in Soweto in South Africa, where they heard a sermon that touched on the subject of adultery. With them today and on this trip, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who has been with the president a lot the last few months. Here's ABC's Ann Compton.
This trip to Africa has been an emotional high for President Clinton after weeks of emotional lows back home. Throughout, Jesse Jackson has assumed a central role in both. This morning's prayer at a Soweto church was the latest sign Jackson has become a spiritual advisor.
We thank you for President Clinton. Hold him in the hollow of your hand.
Jackson's formal role on this trip is that of official presidential envoy to Africa at a time of breathtaking democratic change here.
I'm doing what I've done for 24, 25 years now, except with our government is now on the right side of history.
Instead of demanding political power for blacks in Africa, Jackson's mantra now is money, getting American investment where it can help democracy grow. These days, Jesse Jackson sounds less like the fiery civil rights activist who came to prominence and more like a Wall Street Republican. The once competitive relationship between Jackson and President Clinton has warmed up. The president made a special trip to Wall Street in January when Jackson was promoting black business enterprise in the U.S. 6 days later, President Clinton's world turned upside down, and it was the Reverend Jesse Jackson who came to the White House to console the president in the face of political crisis.
I would urge the American people to pray for the first family and to pray that all of us might get through this ordeal and pray and not panic.
Jackson's spiritual role has not been publicly acknowledged by President Clinton, and his diplomatic role in Africa has worried some human rights groups as not vigorous enough. But this week, Jackson was a central figure, cajoling African leaders who have been slow to embrace democratic reforms. And President Clinton seems satisfied leaning on Jackson for political influence in Africa and moral support at home. Ann Compton, ABC News, with the president in Africa.
Still ahead on World News Tonight this Sunday, the plot thickens as police investigate dozens of deaths at a California hospital. How Johnny Cochran and Fred Goldman ended up on the same side. And just what is this guy doing?